Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Tomorrow it's Friday, Parashat Matot. We are getting close to finishing the book of Numbers, one more portion to go. This week's portion, I want to focus on one important concept that a famous rabbi named Rav Moshe David Vali from Padova, Italy. He was very close with the Ramchal. He was a student of the Ramchal of Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. He wrote volumes on the Bible, on the Tanakh, beautiful explanations in the Kabbalistic style and very important ideas that are so relevant today. And a concept that he talks about is the concept of Mesiut Nefesh, of a person who has to give over himself, literally, for a cause, for the sake of something, for something important. And we have to understand what this concept of Mesiut Nefesh is. Everybody in their lives, they can all bring examples of a particular thing that you have taken upon yourself, that you know more than anything, you invested so much time and so much energy in this particular thing. And that thing is literally something that you could call yours because you invested so much time in it. And when a person invests time and energy and finances in doing something, for sure, that's something that will always bear his name. We're all familiar with that. Now, of course, there are many different levels of this concept. And as someone who lives in the land of Israel, and we know living in the land of Israel is always coupled with tremendous Mesiut Nefesh, with tremendous person having to give over great parts of himself to be able to live here in the land. And of course, again, there are different levels. And I'm referring to, of course, the battle for our future, for the people of Israel here in the land, for what true goodness that's represented by Israel, true democracy here in the Middle East, and the fighting for the rights of the world in reality, not only for the people of Israel, but Israel's a constant fighter for world justice, for values that are worth fighting for, must be fought for against evil in the world. And when a person is part of that, and literally goes to battle, and is willing to give himself, his life, for the sake of a great cause, for the sake that others will continue to live, we know this is called Mesiut Nefesh. This is the highest level there is, when a person literally is transferring himself. Mosel means to give over his soul for the sake of something. And this concept, we will see in a moment how it is so applicable, and it comes out of the very portion we're studying. And we'll begin by, let's begin by looking, we'll skip over the first part, which deals with oaths, which is very, very connected, and we'll get back to that. But if we look in chapter 31, verse number 1, God speaks to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says to him, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. And God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, Le'mor, Nekom nikmat b'nei Yisrael me'et hamidyanim. Achar te'asef el amecha. Here we have a very, very powerful commandment that Hashem gives to Moshe Rabbeinu. What does God say to Moshe Rabbeinu? He says, I want you to take revenge for Israel against the Midianites. We all know that what the Midianites, a terrible tragedy they caused after Balak and Bilam and their whole efforts to try to curse Israel. At the end, they couldn't curse Israel, so they tried their best to hurt, to wound Israel by causing them to sin with the Midianite women and the plague that struck Israel because of them. So God is saying now, God is commanding Moses, I want you to revenge this terrible tragedy that happened to Israel because of the Midianites. And here it's very interesting. It's a personal indebtedness that God has against the Midianites. And here this is the way Ravali describes it. And then the punchline of the verse, God is saying, Achar te'asef el amecha. Afterwards you will be gathered from your people. In other words, you will pass away. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader, the great leader of Israel, the last message that he's receiving, or the last mission of his life, is to fight against the Midyanim, the Midianites, and then he'll pass away. Now, here, literally, this is a war when a person gives himself over, right, endangering his life to fight a war, but all the more so on a leadership level, as a king level of Israel, Moshe knows that when this war is going to take place and it's going to be done, he's going to be ending his life on this earth. It's also literally giving himself over to the other world. He's literally going to pass away after this, which is obviously a great challenge for a person to step away. As it says in the ethics of our fathers, a person is born against his will and a person dies against his will. No one wants to die and leave the world unless they're ill. So that powerful message Moshe Rabbeinu receives. And right away, without any hesitation, Moshe Rabbeinu goes ahead and he says in verse 3, Vayidaber Moshe el ha'am lemor. Moshe speaks to the nation saying, Heichalitzu mi'itechem anashim latzava. He turns to Israel and says, we need soldiers now. We need volunteers for this very powerful mission. V'yu al Midyan litlatet nikmat, and it will be upon the Midianites to give latet nikmat Hashem b'miyad, to do God's revenge against the Midianites. So we see here how there's a personal, again, vendetta we spoke about, how God has against the Midianites what they did to Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to Israel, you have to step up. Volunteer for the battle. Who's going to volunteer? And then in verse 4 we see it says, Elef lamateh, Elef lamateh. I said a tet like the Yemenites do. But anyway, 1,000 for each tribe, Elef lamateh, Lechol matot Yisrael, tishlechut letzavah. So Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, send 1,000 soldiers from each tribe. It's 12,000 soldiers. The Baal Torah makes an interesting comment, bringing the Midrash. It says elef lemateh, elef lemateh. It says the word 1,000 twice. So there's a way of learning out, according to the Midrash, that there were 2,000 from each tribe, not 1,000. So it would be 24,000, as a parallel to the 24,000 that were killed as a result of the plague. And here they're being sent again to the battle, and they're being asked to volunteer. So literally, when you go to battle, you're endangering your life, and we take the small number, 1,000 volunteers from each tribe, or 2,000 from each tribe, willing to literally give their lives for the sake of revenging against the Midianites, what God is commanding to go to do this important battle against the evil force of the Midianites in the world. And in verse number 5 it says, Vayimasru me'alfei Yisrael elef lamateh. Then it says, Vayimasru. V'yimasru means it was given over. It also comes to the word limsol nefesh, perhaps, right? To give your souls over, to literally endanger yourself. So amongst the thousands of Israel, right, there were 12,000 shnei masar elef chalutzei tzava. There were 12,000. Here it says in verse number 5, there were 12,000 directly, according to the simple understanding. 2,000 pioneers, you can say, or special soldiers, the elite force that was willing to give their lives. So we have 12,000 again on the simple understanding, as I mentioned before. Some people say 24,000. Now, the Baal Torah says here, listen very carefully to his words. He says in verse 5, Shemasru atzmam al kedushat Hashem. They literally endangered their lives. For what? For sanctifying the name of God, Latzalat Yisrael, to save Israel. So they're willing to go to battle these special soldiers. And then it says in verse 6, Vayishlach otam, and they were sent, Moshe elef lamateh latzavot otam ve'et Pinchas ben Elazar. They were sent, them and Pinchas, as we all know, the great Phineas, Uklei HaKodesh v'chatzasot HaTorah b'yado, and they bore the holy instruments of holiness and the chatzatzrot, the trumpets. Now, what was the Klei HaKodesh that they had? That was the Aron, that was the Ark, as we know. That's the Aron, and also Rashi brings down the tzitz, with the crown that the high priest wore. Point that we want to stress here. We see that there were people that were willing to limsor nafsham, to give their lives for the sake of fighting the battle against the Midianites, who were a terrible enemy of Israel, and trying to bring Israel down spiritually, and the same, in other words, destroying Israel. And here, for God is literally commanding, it's a personal battle that God is commanding to go to this battle and to do. It wasn't like the other experiences we have in the Bible where nations came against us and that we asked God. God was standing with us in our other battles. But here, God was telling you, go get. It's like something like an Amalek commandment to wipe out this nation, to fight against the nation. And if we go on, we see something very, very interesting. We see that Moshe Rabbeinu, here, again, leading this battle, leading this his last mission on earth, it brings us back to his first days as a leader of Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership began when he saw an Egyptian strike the Jewish slaves, and Moshe Rabbeinu strikes the magician, all magicians. He strikes the Egyptian, and he, at the end, after he literally endangered his life by doing so, as we all know, he was wanted and he had to run away. And when he runs, where does he run away to? He runs away to Midian as well. So he began his life, Rav Ali talks about this, with Mesirut Nefesh, willing to giving of himself for others, for the sake of others. And then he ends up in Midian. And the same thing happens, a repetition in Midian. What happens in Midian? There, he has to contend with the daughters of Jethro by the well, and those coming along and not letting them take water, and he chases them away again, endangering himself, willing to give himself for others. So Moshe Rabbeinu, literally, he contains within that his personality a tremendous willingness for Mesirut Nefesh, to give part of himself for others, and to endanger his own life for the sake of others. That is leadership quality from the beginning. And that we see is taking us all the way here to the end of his life, where the last mission on earth is the Midianites again. He has to deal with this battle again, endangering his life, because he knows for sure this is it. After this mission, he's leaving this world. So he's giving his life for the sake of Israel, and coming full circle, which is amazing representation of this fact. And we see how this concept, all about, first of all, if you pay attention to the division of the spoils here, it's not, God goes along. Let's see a couple of verses about this as well. I think we should check it out. If we look in chapter 31, verse number 25. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, לאמור, שא את ראש מלכו החשבי באדם ובהמה אתה ואלעזר הכהן וראשי אבות העדה. So God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, he's talking about dividing the spoils of war over here. And he says in verse 27, וחצית את המלכוח, make a division of the spoils. בין תופסי המלחמה היוצאים לצבא ובין כל העדה. Between those who went out, the 12,000 or 24,000 volunteers that went out to battle, and between the entire congregation. So it's, first of all, it's not, obviously, we're going to see in a moment, it's not an equal division, because if there were, let's say we take the simple understanding, 12,000 soldiers compared to the rest of Israel, which are millions compared to them. So we see it's not at all an equal division, right? They got half, and all of Israel, all those numbers got half. Not only that, we see, if we continue to see the division, we see that they had to give, there were two things given over. Once every section got their division, they had to give some kind of donation, you'd call it a truma, a gift, right, from what they got, like a tithe. And we see from the Malkoach, as we say, that what got the great pioneering, those elite force, what they received, they gave 1 out of 500 of what they received we called as a gift to the temple. They gave it to the priests as a priestly gift. And the other part of Israel, which was all the millions, they gave a lot more, they gave 1/50th. And there was given to the Levites. So we see also the quality of, what was given by the warriors that went to battle. They gave a higher gift because they gave it to a place of the Kohanim, which is a higher service for Hashem. And Israel gave things to the Levites, which was, a great thing also, but it was a lower service than with the priests. So we see another distinction between, not only that, we see how the Torah defines very carefully what was given by the priests, by the soldiers, the warriors. And it sort of cuts it short. It doesn't mention all what was given by the Israelites. It just says they gave their share, but it doesn't say what they gave, as it literally numbers each item that was given by the warriors. So we see a few differences, and these differences reflect the fact that the value in God's eyes, the value in Israel's eyes, what the warriors did was a much greater thing. And what was the difference? They volunteered. They were willing to go to battle and risk their lives for others, and therefore their portion was much greater. Much greater, although they gave much less also, right? And it was much greater, their portion, in all ways. So we see the distinction here as well. When someone is willing to give his life for something, the value is thousands of times greater. Now, if we look, this is what makes Moses so angry at the end of the portion of Moshe Rabbeinu. Or if we look in chapter 22, which talks about Reuven, the tribe of Reuven and Gad, that they had a lot of flock, and they came over to Moshe Rabbeinu and Elazar, the priest, and they say, we have a lot of flock over here, we have a lot of sheep, and they requested an inheritance on the other side of the Jordan. And literally, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, his fuses pop, and he says right away, why are you pulling the hearts of Israel away? God gave us the land of Israel, now you want them to settle outside the land. Of course, it's also part of Israel, but it's a lower level. This is what your fathers did. This is what they did, the spies. So Moshe Rabbeinu is, God forbid, worried about that they're going to start another trouble here. Because here, this is the exact opposite of someone who gives over for himself. Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned. Because we know when a person is willing to sacrifice everything he has for others. And here, they were worried about their own needs. They wanted to have a nice, beautiful land, and for their pasture land, for their family. So that was a personal kind of thing. And Moshe Rabbeinu right away jumps in the air. What's going on over here? We're getting ready to battle the land. We just finished 40 years. It took us to rectify the sin of the spies. And now you're going to bring it up again? So right away, Moshe Rabbeinu gets very, very angry. And we see, he makes sure that he conditions it. It's called a double condition, that they will agree. And let's read some words over here. I'm not going to read all, of course, it's a very, very long, you can read the verses yourself, but I'm going to read a couple other verses just to stress what we're talking about. Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, if you do this thing and you go, the same exact words used for the battle of Midianites here. If you go before God in war, in other words, you're willing now, how are you going to earn your cities that you're going to build on the other side of the Jordan and all that area? By being a pioneer, by being a warrior for Israel. If you're going to come and you're going to fight for the sake of Israel, and every one of you are going to come over the Jordan, and you are going to help Israel again. And it's always mentioning God, because battling for the sake of Israel is battling for the sake of God. It goes together. And you're coming across and you're going to inherit the land from the enemies of Israel. And the land will be captured. Then you'll be able to go back home. So the test for them was for them to be willing to give their lives as warriors for Israel. And then they'll be able to inherit their places. And if you don't do this, then you will not receive that portion. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu gave them, that condition. So we see again how important it is, that concept of Mesiut Nefesh. Now, we also see this, as a matter of fact, this is very, very beautiful. And at the end of the portion, it talks about, we can just read a few verses here. If you look in chapter 32, verse number 39. Vayelchu b'nei Machir ben Menashe Gil'ada vayilkedua. It says, the children of Machir, the son of Menashe, they went to the Gilead and they captured the Gilead. and they inherited the Amorites that were there. And then it says, "Vayiten Moshe et Gilad l'Machir ben Menashe." Moshe Rabbeinu gives the Gilead, the mountains of Gilead, literally to Machir, the son of Menashe, and he settles there. And it says, "V'Yair ben Menashe alach v'yalkod et chavotehem." And Yair, the other son of Menashe, called Yair, he goes in and he captures the chavot, these little villages over there. Vayikretein chavot Yair, and he calls them Chavot Yair. He calls the villages, these towns, Chavot Yair, after himself. That sounds a little arrogant. He's calling the places he's capturing after his own name. And the answer is not arrogant, because when a person gives his life for something and endangers himself, and the greatest way you can endanger yourself is in going to battle because you're fighting and you may not come back home again, it's called after your name, so it's worthy to call it his name, just like the city of David, right? We know Jerusalem. It's also called the city of David. David, because he was such a warrior for Israel, he received the name, the city of David. And then the last verse of this portion ends with the same thing. V'novach halach v'yilkodet kinat v'et benotea v'yika la novach b'shmo. Novach, the same thing. He got his name called after this place city. He called it Novach after his name, because when a person is moseret nafsho, when he gives his soul and willing to risk his life for something, it becomes his entity, becomes who he is. That's who you are when you give your life over. And if we take this to the beginning of the portion, it just fits in perfectly with oaths. Why does it fit so well with oaths? Because what is the language used in the opening of the portion with oaths? It says le'esol isav al nafsho, to literally tie something on his soul. It uses the word soul, al nafsho. What does it mean to tie something on yourself? It's literally, you are now, when a person makes an oath, he's committing to do something now that before he didn't have to do, but now he's making a commitment. And literally, he has to fulfill those words. Now, it's so important to come up and fulfill what you say. That's why an oath is not meant to be taken lightly. In Judaism, it's a whole great section of our law of how to follow oaths and to abide by oaths. What we say we have to do, it's not only you saying you're going to do something, but the most important thing is to fulfill what you say you're going to do, because that becomes, when you say something, you take upon yourself to do something, we want that, literally, you're leading yourself into the next stage of doing it, which is Mesirut Nefesh, is giving yourself over to that. And when you do so, that is called by your name. And therefore you have a great obligation to go ahead and do and fulfill. We see this, of course, in the Yom Kippur service. The Yom Kippur service begins, the Day of Atonement opens up with a prayer called Kol Nidre, which we nullify all our oaths and vows. And we do that in advance. And why? Because we're very careful. We know that what comes out of our mouth has a great, great meaning and a great effect. And therefore we have to be so careful what we say, because we have to follow up what we say. And we don't want to, again, to make an oath and make it upon ourselves. It's not so simple. You got to follow up and do what you said. If you made an oath to do something and you don't do it, it's a grave, grave sin. And therefore, on that great Day of Atonement, which is a powerful day, it's a day that we literally giving ourselves over to God, asking again, Hashem, please forgive us what we've done, and all the vows that we will make in the coming year, they should be totally nullified. That God should look upon us. We have enough obligations as it is, But we have to be very, very careful to take upon ourselves something, and if we do, we must fulfill it. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu made the Reuven and Gad to do a double condition. You will go over, and if you do not go over, you will not receive it. It was such a powerful thing, because they said they said now that we're going to do Mesirut Nefesh. They're going to go and give their lives for Israel, and therefore we see the power of those words. When they said that, after 100%, Moshe was willing to, at that moment, say, now you will merit in the cities across the Jordan because of your willingness of Mesirut Nefesh. And those words, that the oath that they made, that was the oath that connects us to the beginning of the portion, that again has all that energy and that power as a commitment, and you have to fulfill it. And that's why, again, a person should always be careful before he makes that commitment with his mouth, right? Because otherwise, he has to follow up on those words. That's why we have a custom of saying, B'li neder, without. I will do this without an oath, right? But certain times an oath is an important thing when a person knows he's not going to do it. And it sort of helps him. I took upon myself, I must follow it up. And even in a situation where we don't want to take an oath, God forbid, because it's a serious thing. but we should always follow what we say we're going to do. This message must take it to our lives and our daily lives and anything. Of course, all good things that we say we're going to do, we must follow up on them and do them. And when we do something with all heart and soul and give ourselves for the sake of something, it will be called after our name. Shabbat Shalom, B'sorot Tovot, Yeshuot v'Nechamot.